In the world of global trade, the most significant changes often happen quietly, away from the spotlight. While headlines focus on dramatic summits and public disputes, the real shifts are often subtle, unfolding in boardrooms and government offices, far from the public eye. Today, December 18, 2025, Canada has taken decisive action against General Motors and Stellantis, two of the largest players in the North American auto industry. This move signals a turning point, not just for these companies, but for the entire landscape of international business in the region. This wasn't announced with fanfare, but through a precise regulatory move. There were no grand speeches or breaking news alerts, just a quiet but firm assertion of authority. It marks a shift in how nations can hold multinational corporations accountable. Instead of relying on public pressure or drawn-out negotiations, Canada is using the tools of law and regulation to demand compliance. For decades, capital was king, and governments competed for its favor. Corporations often dictated terms, leveraging their economic power to shape policy and regulation in their favor. Canada's move challenges that, insisting that corporate commitments are binding, not optional. The message is clear. Promises made to the public and government must be honored, or there will be real consequences. Ottawa is using long-standing legal tools to ensure public promises are kept. These are not new laws but existing ones, now wielded with renewed determination and focus. This is about enforcing rules, not just making statements, and its impact could reach far beyond the auto sector. Other industries are watching closely, aware that this precedent could soon apply to them as well. The North American auto industry is deeply integrated, governed by the USMCA, but Canada's action is rooted in its own domestic law. This balance between international agreements and national sovereignty is delicate, and Canada is navigating it with care. This shows a willingness to act unilaterally, but within its legal framework. Canada is not seeking confrontation, but it is also not waiting for permission. The strategy is to avoid a public trade war while still achieving its goals. By working behind closed doors and relying on legal mechanisms, Canada is minimizing disruption while maximizing impact. Washington, usually the loudest in trade disputes, was caught off guard. The US government and industry leaders are now scrambling to understand the implications and respond appropriately. Canada chose a scalpel over a sledgehammer, forcing GM and Stellantis to answer to the fine print of their agreements. This approach is surgical, targeting specific obligations rather than launching a broad attack. The enforcement is a reminder that the most important decisions are often made in the quietest rooms. It's in these moments, away from cameras, that the future of trade is shaped. Canada, often seen as a junior partner, is now asserting its sovereignty in a powerful way. This is a statement of confidence and independence, signaling that Canada will defend its interests on its own terms. This is the start of a new era in North American trade relations. The world is watching, and the rules of engagement are being rewritten, one quiet decision at a time. Over the past 18 months, GM and Stellantis have quietly scaled back their Canadian operations, making significant changes that have rippled through the country's auto sector. GM shifted production at its Ottawa facility, producing far fewer electric vehicles than originally promised to both the public and government partners, leaving parts of the plant underutilized. Meanwhile, Stellantis delayed and downsized its much-anticipated Windsor battery plant investment, pausing construction, and scaling back its initial plans for expansion. These moves, though presented as necessary business decisions, directly contradicted explicit commitments made to Canadian governments during high-profile negotiations. Billions in public funding and incentives had been granted based on promises of job creation, economic growth, and long-term investment in Canadian communities. For many, the scalebacks felt like a breach of trust, undermining Canada's carefully crafted industrial strategy and leaving workers and local leaders anxious about the future. In response, Ottawa launched a low-profile but meticulous review of the agreements, quietly gathering evidence and assessing the company's obligations. There were no public condemnations or dramatic statements, just careful legal groundwork being laid behind the scenes. The government prepared a formal response, building its case on solid, regulatory grounds to ensure accountability. This quiet, methodical approach allowed Canada to strengthen its position without escalating tensions or jeopardizing future investments. The message was clear: public support for industry comes with real enforceable obligations that cannot be ignored. Canada signaled it was fully prepared to enforce those commitments, protecting both public investment and the country's economic future. Canada's enforcement isn't based on new laws, but on a creative use of the Motor Vehicle Safety Act. The act, usually about safety standards, gives Ottawa broad oversight over automakers. By linking the national safety mark to fulfillment of public funding agreements, Canada found a powerful lever. If GM and Stellantis fail to meet their commitments, they risk losing the right to sell vehicles in Canada. This isn't a fine, it's a threat to their entire Canadian business. The strategy sidesteps international trade law, focusing on domestic regulation. Legal experts see this as a precedent. Federal support now comes with enforceable strings. Market access is tied to keeping promises. Canada has expanded its enforcement toolkit in a bold new way. Canada's approach to trade disputes stands in stark contrast to the sweeping tariffs often favored by the United States in recent years. While the U.S. tends to impose broad measures that affect entire industries, Canada's strategy is far more targeted and deliberate. Rather than casting a wide net, Ottawa's actions are precise, focusing specifically on automotive giants GM and Stellantis, rather than the entire auto sector or unrelated industries. This enforcement is firmly anchored in Canadian law and the terms of specific trade agreements, not in political grandstanding or retaliatory gestures. As a result, it becomes much more difficult for critics to label Canada's actions as protectionist or overtly aggressive. Since the measures are justified by legal obligations, the underlying message is clear. Canada isn't seeking to punish, but rather to uphold and enforce the contracts that were mutually agreed upon. By relying on a rule-based method, Canada reduces the risk of escalating tensions into a full-blown trade war, keeping diplomatic channels open. This approach is not only legally defensible, but it also helps to minimize collateral damage to other businesses and sectors that are not involved in the dispute. Now, the responsibility shifts to the corporations themselves, who must justify their actions in compliance with the agreements. The looming threat of losing access to the lucrative Canadian market serves as a powerful motivator for these companies to resolve the issue. In effect, Canada is trading the noise of tariffs for the quiet, yet immense pressure of regulatory enforcement and legal scrutiny. This signals a maturation in Canada's approach to trade enforcement, showing a preference for stability and predictability. Sometimes, the most effective tools in international relations are not the loudest or most dramatic, but the ones that work quietly behind the scenes. In this way, Canada asserts its national interests and protects its economy, all while avoiding major disruptions to global trade flows. Ultimately, it's a strategic, calculated move, one that reflects both confidence and restraint on the world stage. The impact on GM and Stellantis was immediate. Both companies rushed to negotiate with Ottawa, facing the real risk of losing access to the Canadian market. The regulatory threat proved more effective than months of public criticism. Losing Canada would mean lost revenue, logistical chaos, and damaged reputations. The automakers now face a stark choice: restore investments and jobs, or risk a market lockout. The supply chain is feeling the pressure too. Parts manufacturers and logistics firms depend on stable Canadian operations. A shutdown would ripple across North America, idling factories and threatening jobs. Industry groups support the government's action, knowing their future is tied to automaker commitments. The enforcement has sparked a necessary conversation about shared responsibility. The message stability depends on honoring promises. Canada's move sends a clear message to multinationals everywhere. Government incentives are contracts, not gifts. For years, companies secured public funds, then shifted investments with little consequence. Now Canada has shown how to reclaim leverage. The risk for corporations is no longer just reputational, it's existential. Market access is now tied to fulfilling promises, not just repaying subsidies. Corporate strategists must factor in this new sovereign risk. Future negotiations will be more cautious, with clearer terms and stronger enforcement. Governments will demand more transparency and accountability. The era of vague promises is ending. Automakers must now balance disruption, volatility, and assertive regulation. Canada's example could reshape global corporate-government relations. Canada's enforcement sets a new standard for public accountability. It ensures taxpayer money delivers real returns, not empty promises. Other nations will study this model, especially those seeking to attract high-tech manufacturing. The case shows that even middle powers can hold multinationals accountable with the right legal tools. Strong, independent institutions and rule of law are key. This isn't about nationalism, but about upholding contracts. The move strengthens government legitimacy and public trust. It's a powerful affirmation of national sovereignty in a globalized world. Canada has moved from rhetoric to rule-based action. This precedent will shape policy debates for years to come. Canada's actions mark a shift from passive incentives to strategic enforcement. For years, enforcement was weak, relying on corporate goodwill. Now, Ottawa is using targeted, real consequences to ensure compliance. The most powerful leverage isn't tariffs, but regulatory controls tied to market access. This approach is a response to global supply chain vulnerabilities exposed by recent crises. Canada's strategy ensures its industrial policy isn't undermined by distant boardrooms. It's not about closing markets, but about attracting the right investment. The message Canada expects commitments to be honored. This builds trust and attracts long-term partners. The relationship is now one of mutual respect and accountability. The Canada GM Stellantis case is a landmark in global political economy. If Canada prevails, other nations may adopt similar enforcement strategies. This could usher in a new era of corporate accountability and robust public-private partnerships. If the automakers succeed in resisting, it may chill future enforcement efforts. But Canada's strong legal position makes a government victory likely. Multinationals will have to treat agreements as binding contracts, not flexible guidelines. Future subsidy deals will include stronger enforcement and transparency. The focus will shift to securing long-term national benefits. This is more than a trade dispute. It's a strategic rebalancing of power. Canada's move sets a new global standard for government-corporate relations.